Welcome to Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Potasic. Marge was searching for the purpose of her life and the truth that would tie everything together to make sense of what was taught and what was happening on our planet, the fire that was creating all the smoke. Through many experiences, she was finally led to the knowledge book that provided all the answers. Marge is now talking about this gift to humanity on Knowledge Book Radio, so all can be united in peace, love, and harmony. This live call-in show at 1-800-930-2819 is amazing. So get ready to hear about the Knowledge Book. Here's your host, Marge Potasic.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marge Potasic, and you are listening to the Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Potasic on Transformation Talk Radio. And for the next hour or so, we will continue our series of Omega Talks. And these are usually given at the end of every month as part of the unification program of the Call to Friendship Association that is mentioned in the Knowledge Book. Now, what we do in these talks is we take science and unite it with spirituality by discussing world knowledge and connecting it to the Omega dimension. Now, of course, those of you who have read the Knowledge Book or who have been listening to this broadcast, the Omega dimension is the 19th dimension, and that dimension has been opened to humanity for the first time through the Knowledge Book. And this week, we're going to talk about communication, specifically animal communication. But before we go on, I want to say that the United States Knowledge Book website is www.usa.thenowledgebook.net. The Turkish World Brotherhood Union website is www.dkb-mevlana.org.tr. That's www.davidkiteboy.dkb-mevlana.org.tr. And my contact information, cell phone number is 973-787-7035. Email address is mmjp99@gmail.com, maryjohnpeter99@gmail.com. The Call to Friendship website is www.calltofriendship.org, all one word. For Call to Friendship, all one word for the Knowledge Book and the Knowledge Book website. So please do email or text me with any questions that arise from today's topics or from previous shows. Any topics or questions for future shows are very welcome. And I do want to say that I do appreciate any comments and any questions or topics that you may have. So today, again, we're going to be talking about communication, specifically animal communication, and uniting this knowledge that we're talking about with the Omega dimension. So what is communication? First of all, when you look at the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it defines communication as a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. If you look at Wikipedia, it defines communication and states that it actually originates from a Latin word, communicare, which means to share, and it is the act of conveying meaning from one entity or group to another through mutually understood signs, symbols, and Semitic rules. So this is what the world defines as communication, but what does the Knowledge Book say? How does the communication work? So on page 5 of the Knowledge Book, quote, everybody will telepathy 18, it states, quote, the instrument that assembles all the knowledge in one point has been shedding light on you since the period of papyruses, cuneiform writings, and caves. This is your brain. Page 55, communications are made directly and telepathically addressing your frequency levels. So basically, communication is done through the brain, through some means of exchanging symbols, whether it's through telepathically or through voice or through sound or through odor, whatever that may be. Also, on page 177, it states, the telepathic perceptions of your brain powers are the focal point of the universal unification. This is the single property of the mediumic medium. Our friends who have gained cosmic awareness by this means will attain a universal language through a common consciousness. Vocal cords are very insufficient in this language. Brain waves are constantly in connection with universals. Radio signals, communications are silent and profound. Knowledge is given to you by this means. The signals that place the mediums in the connection fields, in fact, reach you through a more advanced vibration than the radio waves. So basically, there's a communication through a magnetic field, through waves, through telepathic signals, or through some kind of radio signals, which are not really radio signals as such given to us. So can animals communicate? I mean, we've seen pets, we've seen animals trying to communicate with us, trying to give us signals so that we know what they want or how they want it, but do they actually communicate with each other? So this following knowledge comes from an excerpt from bestlife.com by Alex Daniel, and this was printed in February 22nd, 2019. So there are very amazing ways that animals communicate that we didn't know about, but know about now because research has been done. So where before we thought that we were the only ones that are able to communicate, and we only had the capacity to communicate, we actually have competition or friends in the animal kingdom that actually communicate as well. So, of course, cats meow, dogs bark, and cows moo. But how do they communicate using these sounds between each other? And maybe research has found they have much more intricate and much more disparate languages between themselves than humans. And right now, based on these studies done by the Linguistic Society of America, they found that there are 6,900 languages in the United States, in the world. So, so basically, based on that comparison, the animal communication or the animal languages are much bigger and higher than anywhere else. So, how do animals communicate, and do they communicate? So from flying rodents that spend their days arguing to the lizards that created their version of food delivery, here is just a taste. So white rhinos, we of course know that the white rhinos have very poor eyesight. They're very nearsighted. So however, what they've developed is a language using dung, using communal dumping grounds, literally, that are called middens, and that serves as a community bulletin board where they leave messages. One rhino may leave a message to another rhino that they are sick, another one is ready to mate, or that a dominant male has recently wandered through to the rest of the group. Okay, that's the white rhino. So they are using the sense of smell, they're using the chemical composition in the dung to be able to communicate. Now on the other side of the scale, there are some things called mantis shrimp, and they're actually flashlights. Now we think that we have very good eyesight, however we only have 3 kinds of cell receptors for light in our eyes, and these mantis shrimp actually have 16 color receptors in their eyes. And they have very specific color reception cells, and basically they emit polarized light. And polarized light can only be seen by them, and I know that, let's say, bees or bumblebees or butterflies also use polarized light to locate, the pollen flowers. And so these produce these lights. They don't reflect light. They actually produce light and send those lights out. And then the other mantis shrimp, based on the kind of flashes that the one mantis shrimp produces, they're able then to communicate with each other. So they communicate through light. When we're talking about whales, the sperm whales basically use clicking sounds. They are known as codas to convey information to one another. Now, it turns out that sperm whales in different areas of the ocean use different clicking patterns. It seems that they are basically like similar regional dialects. So apparently in the Caribbean, the sperm whales there have a sound different and combination of sounds different than those in another part of the ocean. And researchers have become interested in a group near the Caribbean island of Dominica, which they found have even more variations between different clans or even individual whales, where just like humans have, even though they may have the general pattern of grammar and language, let's say in English, however, each person has their own particular variation of that. They will use specific words. And maybe a little bit differently, or they have a different vocabulary subset that they're using to communicate. So it turns out that maybe the sperm whales also have a similar type of structure where they have a specific clicking or coda specific to them that is enabling them to communicate. Now, we have a different kind of communication where one species is basically using another species' way of life to their own advantage. And this is the caterpillars. Caterpillars of the Alcon blue butterfly. So the caterpillars scrape scales on their abdomen to create a kind of song. And this song doesn't communicate with other caterpillars, it communicates to red ants. Now the red ants, basically when they hear that song, they know that their queen needs protection, so they run to the protection of the red queen, which is actually the caterpillar, and they sometimes even kill their own kind to protect the caterpillar. So caterpillar now is using their communication as a secret weapon to protect themselves and gain evolutionary advantage. Elephants, on the other hand, basically use vibrations. Of course, sound is vibration, but it's a different kind of vibration. Until humans are able to listen to very low vibrations, sounds below 20 hertz, otherwise known as infrasound. Of course, our ears maybe could hear it as a kind of a rumble, but elephants can hear this through their pads on their feet, and they can actually communicate with each other distances of 175 miles or so. So it's a very powerful way of communication. Now, while the elephant communicates on the low end of the scale, there are creatures, tiny, big-eyed primates called tarsiers, and they communicate on the other end of the communication scale, on the hertz, on the sound frequencies. And they communicate at frequencies over 20,000 hertz. And of course, we can't hear that, and basically, neither can any of the creatures in the jungle hear that either, because they can only communicate with each other because they're the only ones that are able to hear at frequencies that high. And at some point, scientists actually were able to catch them communicating at 70,000 hertz. So what they do is basically put out a sound, put out a danger signal, put out an alert that only they could hear and the predators can't, and or the jungle noise is overcome that way. Now, of course, communication can also be done through gestures. We have sign language, we have body language. So it turns out ravens do their own kind of sign language. And what they do is use their beaks and their wings by offering items such as moss or stones or twigs, usually, of course, trying to impress the opposite sex. And they also interact by clasping their bills together or moving an item together as a show of potential bonding. So they have their own sign language, and of course, ravens have been known to use tools as well. So where we thought we were the only creatures that were able to use tools, it turns out more than one creature in the animal kingdom are able to use tools as well. Now, when it comes to Egyptian fruit bats, of course we know that fruit bats are blind. They cannot see anything, so it's always been a mystery, or has been a mystery, as to how they're able to fly and not hit any object in front of them. And it turns out when they did further research and used trying to capture higher frequencies of sound than we are usually accustomed to, they found that they do it through sonar by conveying or hitting or using a certain pitch sound. And when the sound bounces back, they're able then to know where they are going. And what they found through research at the Tel Aviv University, they used a program, a machine learning program, an algorithm, to recognize the bats' intonations and the messages they may be conveying. Now, this algorithm basically translated 15,000 calls, and they basically transcribed them into several specific messages. And this may sound very familiar to our usual communication, our human usual communication. They talk about food, they talk about sleep positions, they talk about invasions of personal space, or go away, I don't want you. So basically refusing advances. So we're kind of similar on the same wavelength in terms of communication there as well. Now, we like to groom each other. We like others to groom us, and so do the chimpanzees. But just like we want that particular spot to be scratched, and only in a specific way, and we usually have a way of communicating that to the person who is doing the scratching, the chimps do the same. And basically that is called referential gesturing, and that draws the attention of the other chimp to a specific area they'd like to have groomed. Now, this is a creature that has created its own seamless, meaning they don't have to cook, they don't have to buy groceries, they don't have to do anything. They basically just make a gesture. These are the geckos that live in Madagascar. So this is an instant order takeout long before seamless. So what they do is basically gesture with their heads, and there are creatures called tree hoppers, and these insects digest sap, and then they excrete it in a sugary liquid. And this is known as honeydew. So when a gecko is hungry, basically it gestures to the tree hopper that it would like some of their honeydew. The insects oblige excreting it right into the amphibian's mouth. So that would be nice to have food delivered already pre-cooked, pre-prepared, and all you have to do is swallow it. Now, electric fish, we knew about electric eels, but electric fish actually just emit or discharge electricity. So what they use is something called weakly electric currents, and basically uses voltage. They produce a mild electric discharge and use it to chirp out information, such as a male is stating its intention attracted to a female, or it has attracted a female. And when two of these fish meet, they are known to tweak their wavelengths in order to allow each other to produce similar levels of voltage. So basically, even though they each may be at a slightly different frequency level in terms of the voltage they produce, when they interact, they gradually come together at the same frequency level, so they're easily able to communicate with each other. So this is something maybe like we would be talking to a child and be able to speak to them at a language and a level and word vocabulary that they're able to understand. And when we're talking to someone who's, educated, then maybe we use a different vocabulary. Teachers use different language in kindergarten, different language in high school, and different language in college. So sentence structures is different, everything is different. So basically, depending on who you're talking to, you modify whatever you're doing and how you're doing it to be able to communicate with the other. And of course, sometimes, we hum to ourselves, we sing in the shower, and silverback gorillas also do that. What they do is basically hum to themselves. When they're having a nice little lunch, they hum to themselves and enjoy their food. So when a silverback gorilla is humming, to stay away. They want to be in their own space. They want to be their own thing. So, however, once they stop humming, then everybody knows that, well, it's time to chat, time to communicate, time to hang out together. So that's their way of just specifying a specific thing. Okay. Now, there's also the tap dancing blue cap cordon bleu. Now, if you have ever seen videos of this, it's amazing how fast those feet can actually stamp. So this bird has its own particular dance moves, and it uses a kind of a winged tap dance to attract a mate. So both of the birds, male and female, both will court by holding a piece of nesting material in their beak and then bob up and down while they sing and make fast dance steps with their feet. The research catch the attention of a mate, but to demonstrate health and fitness. Now, apes in general have many different ways to communicate with each other. And what they've done, researchers have done, is they actually isolated 80 gestures at least of how they communicate with each other. So when a particular gesture is given, that has a specific meaning to the other apes. But what turns out, and it's very interesting, that these gestures significantly overlap with those used by human toddlers. As the Smithsonian puts it, quote, researchers found that human toddlers use 52 discrete gestures to communicate, including clapping, hugging, stomping, raising their arms, and shaking their heads, often stringing the moves together to convey complex ideas. It turns out that the chimps also use 46 of the same gestures, meaning that there is a 90% overlap. So it's interesting how advanced we are, but at the same time we are using something that we have basically learned a while back. And chimpanzees also play footsie. Basically, if someone wants to get a ride or give a ride to another chimp, basically they put their feet out, and that means, okay, climb on board, I'll give you a ride. So basically they have so many gestures that they could be put into a book that basically can be called the Great Ape Dictionary. Now, we get to understand the progression of evolution and communication through some of what the Knowledge Book states. On page 438, quote, first, a thought is at the same level in every living being on your planet. However, their levels of cognizance, logic, awareness are different. The living being other than humans receive signals from the instinctive section of thought. Humans, too, receive signals from a part of this instinctive section of thought that you call the sixth sense. In animals, the circuit of thought, awareness, cognizance is valid. Since there is no logic, they are connected to the instinctive circuit through the instinctive section of thought. Each energy that has come into existence has an evolution and incarnation order in accordance with its own functional medium. These are stone, soil, grass, human, all the living beings, and the different energies peculiar to them, end quote. And again, it's start of a quote, they all act in different evolutionary processes, always subject to the next advanced function in conformity with their evolution ordinances. So basically, depending on where you are on the evolutionary scale, you will have specific magnetic fields you're connected to, with specific knowledge you're connected to, and you're able then to progress and grow and evolve, and therefore get higher and higher and be able to communicate at higher and higher level. Also on page 243, talking about stellar sounds. Vibration of love are divine waves that hold the entire cosmos. The entire creation came into existence through these vibrations. Everything functions parallel to the law of nature and the equilibrium of nature. Apart from this, there are billions of stellar sounds that are in connection with you telepathically. Your planet has yet neither found nor heard the essence of these sounds. Your sixth senses are antennas that can receive these sounds, even if very little. So there's all kinds of communication going on everywhere that we don't hear, or we don't think we hear, because we don't quite realize that's what's going on. Now, we'll take a look at dolphins. Of course, dolphins, we know that they're very intelligent, and that's one of their most outstanding characteristics and features. And there are thousands of members of the animal kingdom. Of them all, the dolphins take one of the top places regarding intelligence. So they have a very complex brain, which is astonishing to some scientists, and it is almost comparable to that of humans. And based on its body size, the brain is bigger, than other animals' brains. So when you compare the brain size to the body size of other animals, they found that the dolphin brain is 4 to 5 times bigger than other animals with similar, body size. What they're finding is that most of the behaviors show the development of their brain and their ability to understand situations. They process information from their environment in a similar way to people, and some say that they can solve problems like humans, for example. They have a very complex form of communication that is evolving and diverse. They're also very creative and playful animals. The behavior is not mechanical or rigid. It's not the same rote behavior, let's say instinctive behavior. And they seem to enjoy playing and being in companionship with other dolphins and individuals. And they also have empathy. So it suggests that they experience emotions such as sadness or joy. They also can learn. Therefore, they're highly requested animals for water parks, although some may, and it's actually a very controversial topic as to why we would keep these very intelligent, very flexible, very loving kind of animals or kind of creatures cooped up learning tricks. So not only can they learn, they actually can transmit their learning to other generations of dolphins. They also know to use tools. So if they don't want to have their noses scraped on rough surfaces, they take a sponge and put it to their snout, so that protects them from these rough surfaces. And members of a pod actually collaborate and work with each other, and sometimes they collaborate with other kinds of species of animals. And some scientists have argued that the social intelligence of these cetaceans competes with that of the great apes because they can demonstrate empathy towards their companions and help them when they are injured or immobilized. Now, we measure intelligence by certain criteria. And the higher the intelligence, then the higher would be the self-awareness. And dolphins basically are self-aware. And they know who they're looking at in the mirror. They know it's themselves that they're looking at. And again, that this becomes a signal, a sign of abstract thinking. They also have, and some research has shown that they have the learning ability of a 3-year-old child, according to someone called Diana Rice of New York City University. Maybe that's because they only tested them for 3-year-old tasks. However, despite the fact that they're considered to be a 3-year-old level as far as humans are concerned developmentally, they have a very sophisticated communication system, and that's why they are so successful against their predators. Because they survive, because they communicate with each other and allows them then to organize and cooperate to increase their probabilities of survival. So if you have one brain, that one brain can only think of so many things. However, if you have 2 brains attacking a problem, then you have maybe 4 times the possibility of arriving at a solution. The more brains that are involved, the more solutions to a problem can be produced, and therefore your ability to solve a problem, to be able to exist, actually goes up. So how do this communication take place in the dolphins? Each dolphin develops its own distinctive sound from the first years of life. And all individuals produce a unique sound, different from the other dolphins, so they can fully identify each other. Just like humans have their own voice, and just like a child and just like a duck can recognize the mother from their voice and imprint on that voice, dolphins also have their own unique sound. And they can actually identify each other through the sound, just like we can identify, let's say, our sons or daughters or uncles or aunts or parents or far away. When you hear their voice on the telephone, you can the dolphins also can identify themselves in the same way. But how are these sounds produced? I mean, dolphins themselves don't have any vocal cords. However, what they do have is they use part of their larynx to emit sounds, and this is in the region of the nasal air sacs. Now, this does not mean that the dolphins have a voice per se. However, there is a tissue in the nasal area that has a structure that project in the duct. When the air passes through that section, the tissue vibrates and sound is produced. So even though they don't have vocal cords per se, they have some membrane in their nasal cavity that vibrates just like our vocal cords vibrate when air passes through them. So basically, they have their own way of producing sound and their own pitch. And they produce two types of sound: a continuous tone and burst pulsed sounds. So the continuous sounds include whistles, squeaks, and squeals. And they are frequency modulated sound because they can change the tone of the sound. That is, they can rise up and they can rise down. The language that's most like this is Chinese, where each word has its own down to up to down modulation in pitch. There's also a different kind of sound, and that is pulse sounds, and these are recognized as clicks, and they're the ones that are produced successively at regular intervals. So it's kind of like Morse code, ... dash. So different dimensions mean different context. Dolphins can make sound to interact socially, when they separate from their peers, when they are excited, when they are alarmed, or just when they feel happy. And the sound basically depends on the situation that they're in. If a dolphin is lost, they have actually been observed to produce a whistle frantically to call their companions. In individuals of subspecies emit pulsating sounds if they become excited or angry. Apparently, this is also intended to make their emotional state known to other dolphins. So they can cry out for help, they can show their anger through their sounds, and each one of these sounds is specific to the situation that they are in. They rely primarily on sound to exchange information. They can also communicate through touch and body language. I mean, we mainly communicate through our voices, through the words that we use. However, we also communicate through facial expression, through our hands, through the body postures also. So as far as the dolphin is concerned, the body positions convey the dolphin's mood. An S-shaped posture demonstrates anger or aggression and is a way of saying, do not mess with me right now. And if they are in a fight, they can expand their pectoral fins and extend their jaws to look bigger and more dangerous. If you've ever seen a cat be afraid of something coming at them, the cat will instinctively turn sideways to that which is coming at him or her, and they will stand their fur on end and basically look twice as big and therefore more dangerous and not as tasty to eat. So dolphins do the same thing. And actually humans also have the similar kind of behavior. They also communicate through touch. The skin of the cetaceans is very sensitive to the touch, and if they are in a good mood, they can make physical contact with flippers by pressing them against another dolphin's flippers. Excuse me. And they also send signals without voice, meaning without their own particular sound. And this is tail slapping. It's a vertical blow of the tail against the water surface, and this actually often indicates aggressiveness. But it could also express the desire to leave the area where they are in or to ask for attention. There's also flipper slapping. It probably has the same goals as the blows on the surface with the tail, but in this case, dolphins hit their flippers against their body or the water surface. So dolphins for sure have communication, but can they actually communicate linguistically? Do they have a specific language structure or grammar? And actually there is some evidence for the fact that they do communicate linguistically. Dolphins actually tend to stay within their pods and may have trouble understanding foreign dolphins. So it's kind of like us going to Russia, or going to Turkey, or going to Spain, or whatever language or whatever country language we don't understand. And they have the same kind of a situation where they don't understand the language of foreign dolphins. And some studies were done on dolphins near Scotland, and these individual dolphins seem to have names, or at least other dolphins use specific and unique whistles only in the presence of a certain other dolphin, as if calling them by name. And unlike any other animal besides humans, dolphins exhibit a tendency to take turns when vocalizing, making their communication sound like a conversation. So when we talk, we say something, we give a message, we wait, another person gives a message, and then they wait for us to respond, and back and forth and back and forth. So it looks like dolphins are doing the same thing. They've also been doing some very basic linguistic studies of dolphins, and they found certain sound patterns. And according to some studies, dolphin sounds follow the same basic patterns of all human basic language, from Morse code to Chinese. So basically, they do have grammar, they do have language, as we understand language. So in summary, a hallmark of human communication is vocal turn taking. And until recently, taking turns was thought to be unique to humans, but now new data indicates that marmosets, a New World monkey, take turns when vocalizing too. So we seem to have thought that we do everything the best, and everything that we have does not exist in an animal kingdom. However, we may just have a more refined system of something that already exists in the animal kingdom. So what communication does is allows individuals to coordinate their behavior and can therefore facilitate cooperation. This effect can be amplified when the communication itself is cooperative, with individuals working together to make sure their message gets transmitted and properly decoded. Cooperative communication is rare in nature, and cooperative vocal exchange, in which individuals take turns signaling over an extended sequence of exchange and control the properties of their utterances, like timing, has been observed only in humans. So basically, there's a pattern to our talking. We say a thought, we say a sentence, we say a few sentences to express some kind of an idea. We wait, the other person takes their turn to talk, they wait, and we go back and forth and back and forth. So apparently this kind of communication is rare in nature. However, it turns out that it's not as rare as it may seem, because there's a study that was done by Takahashi Narayanan and Gazanfar that was reported in Current Biology that the common marmoset also exhibits this kind of cooperative communication. What Takahashi found is that pairs of marmosets coordinate their vocal exchanges over extended periods, such as a monkey's call timing is periodically coupled with the receiver waiting for approximately 5 seconds before responding to the call of its partner, and both individuals speeding up or slowing down their calls as necessary to maintain the coupling. The study also suggests that the mechanism underlying the turn-taking is mutual entertainment with dynamics characterized by coupled oscillators. So we're not unique. There are, again, in the higher realm, because this is a marmoset which shows Basically, it can take turns speaking, which means they are communicating in that way. So at the very least, at the very minimum, Takahashi's study suggests that it would be worth thinking more creatively about animal communication. It may be that the complexity of animal communication lies in unconventional grammar and pragmatics rather than in the signals themselves. So basically, we think, or we usually approach everything from our own particular perspective. So for us, language is vocalization, a particular style, a particular grammatical structure, and that is what we're expecting from other creatures to follow. However, it turns out that other creatures may have their own grammar, have their own linguistic capability that we don't know about because we haven't studied it yet. Just like we didn't know how bats were able to miss trees, miss bushes, miss branches because they were blind, because we didn't know that sound was being used. So maybe there are communication pathways that were used or are being used by animals that we haven't yet found, or we haven't gotten the machinery, the mechanism by which we could measure this. So human and animal communication differ in significant ways, and current research suggests that animals do not, according to Western Washington University professor of linguistics Edward Vida. So there have been attempts to teach animals to communicate using symbols, but that has shown little progress, and they usually pose the example or present the example of a parrot. A parrot can say human words, however, doesn't know what that word means and does not know what's going on and the reason why that word is being used. However, despite this major difference where humans know what the word means and the parrot will not, we do share certain characteristics. So basically, according to Vida, all systems of communication contain units of form that have specific meaning, linguistically referred to as signs. So words are the most used sign of human communication. Animals also use signs when communicating. Their signs can take a variety of forms, depending on the species. Foxes have 20 distinct forms of vocalization. Electric eels have a system of electrical impulses to communicate with each other. And white rhinos have dung, and the shrimp have polarized light. So every cry or every impulse has a distinct meaning to other foxes or eels, much as a human word has a specific meaning. Humans and animals share three basic forms of signs used in communication: sound, odor, and body movement. So the greatest similarity between human and animal communication is using sound. We all use sound. Humans convey emotion using words and tone in much the same way as animals communicate emotion through sound, or fear through sound, or warning through sound. Now, according to an article from the Mesa College, scientists have observed wild vervet monkeys use three distinct alarm calls depending on the type of predator they are warning against. So when another vervet monkey hears the call, they know exactly what kind of danger is present. Some baby vervets were observed using the alarm cry for an eagle whenever they saw a bird. But eventually they very quickly learned that a bird is a bird, but an eagle is an eagle, and eventually they would only cry out and use that specific cry when they saw an eagle. And what they're saying is that this is very similar to a child eventually learning that not all females are mama, that their own mother is their mama. And of course, there's a communication through odor, as we have seen through the white rhino. However, that also exists in the human communication. But here, it is almost imperceptible, in comparison with animal communication. However, the odor does contribute to human bonding. There was an article in the Journal of Marriage and Family where researcher Eric Filsinger and Richard Fabe suggest that odor communication in humans contributes to family recognition, maternal bonding, and mate selection. Similar behaviors has been observed in animals, as odor is used to mark territorial boundary, warn of intruders, and to proclaim a readiness to mate. And of course, we all know body language, and body language in both humans and animals resemble each other in certain situations. So this is something like an animal that's cowering in fear is similar to a human that is frightened by its surroundings. Of course, just like the animal shrinks in size, kind of to disappear, a human that's scared also will shrink inside, make themselves as little as they can be, and freeze in fear. So when they studied ape gestures, researchers Simon Pika and Katja Label noted similarities between gestures made by apes to communicate and those made by human infants. Their study determined that apes use specific gestures intentionally to communicate in some ways that are similar to those of children. Now, in the knowledge book, it shows the progression from instinctive animal communication to higher communication. So animals use instinct, connected to instinct, and humans are connected to higher consciousness. So on page 48, after the living beings you evaluate as having the quality of being an animal complete their evolution ordinance through the triplet of thought, cognizance, awareness peculiar to themselves, the plan comes into effect and connects them to the section of logic by rendering certain changes in the cellular functions. And all through life, the system of logic, awareness, cognizance, doubt, quest, discovery continues. And still later, by acting through the cognizance, logic, awareness of the ordinance, we finally gain universal consciousness. On page 639, by the evolutionary progresses of the dimensions they are in, these energy evolutions had formed later the forms of stone, earth, sand, fire, water, plant, animal, and by following an energy form that could reach the final evolutionary boundary, they had reached a scale. So every entity, every being on the planet has its own particular evolution level, has its own particular evolutionary ordinance, its own particular way of evolving. And there's an evolution plan for each dimension. So insects have their own evolution plan and ordinance. Same thing with the higher forms of animals, same thing with humans. And each animal progresses through their own individual dimension and goes through the ordinance of that dimension, through the experiences of that dimension, are able to evolve to higher and higher dimensions. And on page 801, the knowledge book states, in accordance with the ordinance of existence, each existing totality, including the entire creation, forms a magnetic scale according to its own totality. For example, there are magnetic fields of plants, trees, flowers, wolves, birds, stones, soil, in short, of everyone carrying energy formed in accordance with its own frequency power. So basically, as long as two entities are in the same magnetic field, they will have the same frequency. They will be at the same frequency, and therefore they will be able to understand each other. So when I'm thinking, there are some certain individuals who are known as horse whisperers, dog whisperers, cat whisperers, all kinds of whisperers. To me, it seems like those individuals are able to somehow tap in to that magnetic field of that particular animal or that particular species of animal and be able to communicate with them at their own level, to be able to somehow translate their own thoughts into what, or translate the cats or dogs or whatever, or horses' thoughts into their own understanding of what the horse or the animal needs and be able to communicate with them. The same thing happens with humans. Those individuals on the same magnetic field, at the same frequency level, at the same evolution level, are able to easily understand each other. So, a person is able to somehow easily communicate with one person but cannot understand what another person is saying, even though they're using the same language. They are not at the same frequency level, therefore they are not at the same understanding level, they are not at the same magnetic field, and will be difficulty in communicating. However, over the span of time, eventually, all the humans, especially through the work being done by the Knowledge Book and its studies, all the humans will be at the same consciousness level, therefore at the same magnetic field, and therefore will be easily able to communicate and will have universal language, okay? So as demonstrated in the information that we have currently shared, communication is very diverse in the animal kingdom and advances as their evolution advances. Initially, humans are also connected to the instinctive section of thought through their sixth sense. Now, as humans develop their sixth sense, they gradually connect to ever higher frequencies and knowledge based on their degree of attaining true love and altruism on their evolution level. Through these endeavors, they eventually earn the right to be connected to the triangle of cognizance, the totality of intellect, logic, and awareness, thereby attaining universal consciousness. So basically, we are all on one journey, and that journey is an evolutionary journey. And that journey takes us through specific ordinances, through specific rules and regulations, through specific experiences that we go through to be able to arrive at to be the human of today. We went through the sacred texts, we went through the teaching of those sacred texts, and those sacred texts have produced the human of today. And that human of today is basically now poised to be a different human being, to be a tolerant human being, one that actually embraces everyone with love and acceptance and tolerance. So what we're going through right now, and what everyone is going through right now, is basically an evolution and basically a selection. Who are you going to be backing? Who are you going to be liking or disliking? Or whether you're able to accept your enemy as your friend, because eventually even the enemies are your friends because they are your greatest teachers that ever lived. So I think that's about all we have time for today. I think we will continue the discussion of communication next time as well. So you've been listening to the Knowledge Book Radio with March Patazik. I'd like to remind everyone that the United States Knowledge Book website is www.usa.theknowledgebook.net. My telephone number for questions and topics is 973-787-7035. And we'll talk to you next week. Take care. See you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Knowledge Book Radio with Marge Patazik. Marge was led to the Knowledge Book, a gift to humanity, and its time of transition to the Golden Age that provided the truth and energies and frequencies. Now, she shares information from and answers questions about the Knowledge Book with you each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com. For more information, visit Marge at usa.theknowledgebook.net.
Views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its management, or advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.